Sind Sie der Typ von Person, der leicht beeinflusst werden kann?
Are you the type of person who can be easily influenced? Are you the type of person who can be easily influenced?
Bitte wählen Sie ein passendes Kleid für den Anlass.
Please choose a suitable dress for the occasion. Please choose a suitable dress for the occasion.
Studentenaustauschprogramme sind eine großartige Möglichkeit, eine andere Kultur kennenzulernen.
Student exchange programs are a great way to get acquainted with a different culture. Student exchange programs are a great way to get acquainted with a different culture.
Die Erfindung von Mobiltelefonen war ein großer Meilenstein in der Entwicklung der Kommunikation.
The invention of cell phones was a huge milestone in the development of communication. The invention of cell phones was a huge milestone in the development of communication.
Die Sprechzeit in Debatten wird proportional auf jede Gruppe, ihrer Größe entsprechend, aufgeteilt.
Speaking time in debates is shared out proportionally to every group in accordance with their size. Speaking time in debates is shared out proportionally to every group in accordance with their size.
Hacksaw Ridge ist ein Muss für Kinogänger, die sich für den Zweiten Weltkrieg interessieren.
Hacksaw Ridge is a must-see for moviegoers interested in World War II. Hacksaw Ridge is a must-see for moviegoers interested in World War II.
Der Klarheit halber möchte ich, dass Sie wiederholen, was Sie gerade gesagt haben.
For the sake of clarity, I would like you to repeat what you've just said. For the sake of clarity, I would like you to repeat what you've just said.
Die schillernden Lichter eines schönen 7 Fuß großen Weihnachtsbaums.
The dazzling lights of a beautiful 7 feet tall Christmas tree. The dazzling lights of a beautiful 7 feet tall Christmas tree.
Abgesehen von extremen Arten, hat Alex bereits alle Sportarten ausprobiert.
Apart from extreme types, Alex has already tried all kinds of sports. Apart from extreme types, Alex has already tried all kinds of sports.
Taschengeld ist ein Anreiz für Kinder, in der Schule bessere Leistungen zu erbringen.
Pocket money is an incentive for children to perform better at school. Pocket money is an incentive for children to perform better at school.
Die Frau des Bürgermeisters ging alles mit einer positiven Einstellung an.
The mayor's wife approached everything with a positive attitude. The mayor's wife approached everything with a positive attitude.
Brandon hatte in jedem Bereich, den wir diskutierten, eine absolut einzigartige und aktuelle Perspektive.
Brandon had an absolutely unique and up-to-date perspective in every area we discussed. Brandon had an absolutely unique and up-to-date perspective in every area we discussed.
Ein Blockhaus reduziert die Heizkosten um ungefähr 30%.
Having a log house reduces heating bills by roughly 30%. Having a log house reduces heating bills by roughly 30%.
Die meisten Sportler halten ihr Energieniveau durch richtige Ernährung und ausreichend Schlaf aufrecht.
Most sports people maintain their energy levels by proper nutrition and enough sleep. Most sports people maintain their energy levels by proper nutrition and enough sleep.
Die Landschaft auf den Seychellen ist von kristallklaren Sandstränden geprägt.
The landscape in the Seychelles is characterized by crystal clear, sandy beaches. The landscape in the Seychelles is characterized by crystal clear, sandy beaches.
Manche Menschen müssen zur Therapie gehen, weil es für sie eine Herausforderung ist, mit Stresssituationen umzugehen.
Some people need to go to therapy because it is challenging for them to handle stressful situations. Some people need to go to therapy because it is challenging for them to handle stressful situations.
Ich kann eine deutliche Verbesserung in Finleys sozialen Interaktionen sehen.
I can see definite improvement in Finley's social interactions. I can see definite improvement in Finley's social interactions.
Wenn wir keine Verantwortung für unser Handeln übernehmen würden, könnten wir leicht als rücksichtslose Personen charakterisiert werden.
If we didn't take responsibility for our actions, we could be easily characterized as reckless individuals. If we didn't take responsibility for our actions, we could be easily characterized as reckless individuals.
An einen Rollstuhl gebunden, versucht er, seine körperlichen Mängel durch effektive geistige Arbeit auszugleichen.
Confined to a wheelchair, he tries to compensate his physical shortcomings by doing effective mental work. Confined to a wheelchair, he tries to compensate his physical shortcomings by doing effective mental work.
Er ist im wahrsten Sinne des Wortes ein Gentleman.
He is a gentleman in every sense of the word. He is a gentleman in every sense of the word.
Wenn Carol nicht dazu in der Lage gewesen wäre, sich in die Patienten im Krankenhaus hineinzuversetzen, wäre sie keine wirklich gute Krankenschwester gewesen.
If Carol hadn't been able to empathize with the patients at the hospital, she wouldn't have been a really good nurse. If Carol hadn't been able to empathize with the patients at the hospital, she wouldn't have been a really good nurse.
Die hübsche Privatdetektivin errötete tief, nachdem der Premierminister ihr ein Kompliment für ihre neue Frisur gemacht hatte.
The pretty private investigator blushed deeply after the Prime Minister complimented her on her new hairstyle. The pretty private investigator blushed deeply after the Prime Minister complimented her on her new hairstyle.
Einer meiner Computerprogrammierkollegen fragte Will, ob er jemals auf den malerischen Fidschi-Inseln gewesen sei.
One of my fellow computer programmers asked Will if he had ever been to the picturesque Fiji. One of my fellow computer programmers asked Will if he had ever been to the picturesque Fiji.
Es gibt keinen Grund für ihn, Angst zu haben, sein Gewissen ist rein.
There is no reason for him to be afraid, his conscience is clear. There is no reason for him to be afraid, his conscience is clear.
Ihr Mangel an fließendem Englisch kann ein großes Hindernis bei der Suche nach einer Au-pair-Position im Ausland sein.
Her lack of speaking fluent English can be a major obstacle in finding a babysitter position abroad. Her lack of speaking fluent English can be a major obstacle in finding a babysitter position abroad.
Weswegen Rees am meisten besorgt war, nämlich einen Job mit flexiblen Arbeitszeiten zu finden, wurde in Kürze gelöst.
What Rees had been mostly concerned about, that is, finding a job with flexible working hours, was shortly resolved. What Rees had been mostly concerned about, that is, finding a job with flexible working hours, was shortly resolved.
Ich habe heute Abend keine Lust zu trainieren, wenn es Ihnen nichts ausmacht, würde ich stattdessen lieber diese Biografie zu Ende lesen.
I don't feel like exercising tonight. If you don't mind, I'd rather finish reading this biography instead. I don't feel like exercising tonight. If you don't mind, I'd rather finish reading this biography instead.
Personen mit einem vollen Terminkalender neigen dazu, wichtige Daten zu vergessen, es sei denn, diese sind in ihrem Kalender eingetragen.
People with a busy schedule tend to forget important dates unless they are recorded in their calendar. People with a busy schedule tend to forget important dates unless they are recorded in their calendar.
Frauen- und Mädchenflüchtlinge gelten als besonders gefährdete Opfer des Menschenhandels.
Women and girl refugees are considered especially vulnerable victims of human trafficking. Women and girl refugees are considered especially vulnerable victims of human trafficking.
Ich wünschte, dieser brillante Bewerber hätte unsere Bedingungen akzeptiert.
I wish that brilliant applicant had accepted our conditions. I wish that brilliant applicant had accepted our conditions.
Michelle war im Begriff im Juli in die Niederlande zu ziehen, als sie unerwartet die Liebe ihres Lebens in Madrid traf.
Michelle was about to move to the Netherlands in July when she unexpectedly met the love of her life in Madrid. Michelle was about to move to the Netherlands in July when she unexpectedly met the love of her life in Madrid.
Wir sind mehr oder weniger mit allen Renovierungsarbeiten, die wir in den letzten Monaten durchgeführt haben, fertig.
We are more or less ready with all the renovation work that we have been doing for the last few months. We are more or less ready with all the renovation work that we have been doing for the last few months.
Dieses Stück Käse gab mir plötzlich Inspiration dazu, was ich am Wochenende für meine Gäste kochen sollte.
That piece of cheese suddenly gave me inspiration about what to cook for my guests on the weekend. That piece of cheese suddenly gave me inspiration about what to cook for my guests on the weekend.
Die Qualität des Materials des Kleides schien für Helen keine Rolle zu spielen.
The quality of the material of the dress didn't seem to matter to Helen. The quality of the material of the dress didn't seem to matter to Helen.
Globalisierung bezieht sich auf eine Art Standardisierungsprozess, der alle Menschen auf der Welt betrifft.
Globalization refers to a kind of standardization process that affects all people in the world. Globalization refers to a kind of standardization process that affects all people in the world.
Wie verschieden unser Leben auch immer sein mag, wir sind alle gleich geschaffen worden.
However different our lives are, we have all been created equal. However different our lives are, we have all been created equal.
Als ich in diese charmante enge Straße in Venedig einbog, wurde mir klar, dass ich vorher schon dort gewesen war.
As I turned into that charming narrow street in Venice, I realized that I had been there earlier. As I turned into that charming narrow street in Venice, I realized that I had been there earlier.
Dieses Gebiet wurde in den letzten Jahren aufgrund der schlechten Finanzierung durch den Gemeinderat vernachlässigt.
This area has been neglected for the last few years due to poor funding from the local council. This area has been neglected for the last few years due to poor funding from the local council.
Die Küstenwache in Tossa de Mar warnte uns, dass dieser Strandabschnitt bei Flut vollständig unter Wasser sein würde.
The coastal guards in Tossa de Mar warned us that that stretch of the beach would be completely underwater at high tide. The coastal guards in Tossa de Mar warned us that that stretch of the beach would be completely underwater at high tide.
Der Tierarzt sagte ihnen, dass er ihren Hund im Februar gegen Meningitis hätte impfen sollen.
The vet told them that he should have vaccinated their dog against meningitis in February. The vet told them that he should have vaccinated their dog against meningitis in February.
Man kann auf Kritik auf verschiedene Art reagieren, aber beleidigt zu sein, ohne sich seinen Schwächen zu stellen, ist nicht die beste.
You can respond to criticism in a variety of ways, but getting offended without facing your shortcomings is not the best one. You can respond to criticism in a variety of ways, but getting offended without facing your shortcomings is not the best one.
Multikulturalismus ist an sich kein Problem, wenn die Anwohner ihre komplexen Probleme friedlich bewältigen können.
Multiculturalism is not a problem per se if local inhabitants can handle its complex issues in a peaceful manner. Multiculturalism is not a problem per se if local inhabitants can handle its complex issues in a peaceful manner.
Bis alle Sachen des Vorbesitzers entfernt sind, können wir nicht in die neue Wohnung einziehen.
Until all the belongings of the previous owner are removed, we won't be able to move into the new apartment. Until all the belongings of the previous owner are removed, we won't be able to move into the new apartment.
Abgesehen von ein paar Ausrutschern, war die Preisverleihung insgesamt ein großer Erfolg.
Apart from a few slip-ups, the awards ceremony was altogether a great success. Apart from a few slip-ups, the awards ceremony was altogether a great success.
Meine Studienmitbewohner haben alle Lernmaterialien sorgfältig nach ihrer Wichtigkeit kategorisiert.
My undergraduate roommates have diligently categorized all the study materials according to their importance. My undergraduate roommates have diligently categorized all the study materials according to their importance.
Jean hatte einen schlechten Tag, also nimm ihre Anschuldigungen nicht persönlich.
Jane was having a bad day, so don't take her accusations personally. Jane was having a bad day, so don't take her accusations personally.
Warum sind die Medien Ihrer Meinung nach eines der effizientesten Mittel, um unser Selbstwertgefühl zu formen?
Why do you think the media is one of the most efficient means of forming our self-esteem? Why do you think the media is one of the most efficient means of forming our self-esteem?
Der junge brasilianische Weltmeister im Schwimmen konnte sich in viel kürzerer Zeit als erwartet von seiner Verletzung erholen.
The young Brazilian world champion swimmer was able to recover from his injury in much less time than expected. The young Brazilian world champion swimmer was able to recover from his injury in much less time than expected.
Scheinbar war es eine hilfreiche Geste von Toni, für seine Mutter einzukaufen, aber ich weiß, dass er etwas im Schilde führt.
Seemingly, it was a helpful gesture of Tony to do the shopping for his mom, but I know he is up to something. Seemingly, it was a helpful gesture of Tony to do the shopping for his mom, but I know he is up to something.
Einige unwiderrufliche Auswirkungen der globalen Erwärmung sind schmelzende Eisberge, steigende Meeresspiegel und häufigere Überschwemmungen und Dürren.
Some irrevocable effects of global warming are melting icebergs, rising sea levels, and more frequent floods and droughts. Some irrevocable effects of global warming are melting icebergs, rising sea levels, and more frequent floods and droughts.
Entgegen allgemeiner Überzeugung half Mr. White seinem Anwalt aus, weil er ihn für sein Geschäft brauchte, nicht weil er ihm etwas schuldete.
Contrary to general belief, Mr. White bailed out his lawyer because he needed him for his business, not because he owed him anything. Contrary to general belief, Mr. White bailed out his lawyer because he needed him for his business, not because he owed him anything.
Stressphasen zu durchlaufen ist unvermeidlich, wenn man für ein großes Unternehmen wie dieses arbeitet.
Going through stressful phases is inevitable if you work for a large corporation like that. Going through stressful phases is inevitable if you work for a large corporation like that.
Das ist eine Art von Frage, die sie immer zögerlich beantwortet, weil sie es vorzieht, nicht über ihr Einkommen zu sprechen.
This is a type of question she always hesitates to answer because she prefers to avoid talking about her income. This is a type of question she always hesitates to answer because she prefers to avoid talking about her income.
Deren Gefahren ignorierend, hat Spencer bereits ein Vermögen für Glücksspiele ausgegeben.
Ignoring its dangers, Spencer has already spent a fortune on gambling. Ignoring its dangers, Spencer has already spent a fortune on gambling.
Wie stehen die Chancen, dass wir heute, hier in Washington D.C. den ehemaligen Präsidenten der USA treffen?
What are the odds of us meeting the former president of the USA today here, in Washington, D.C.? What are the odds of us meeting the former president of the USA today here, in Washington, D.C.?
Übermäßiges Online-Spielen kann den Realitätssinn der Spieler verzerren.
Excessive online gaming can distort the player's sense of reality. Excessive online gaming can distort the player's sense of reality.
Es könnte einige Zeit dauern, bis Bruce merkt, was er verloren hat, aber er wird es irgendwann tun.
It might take time for Bruce to realize what he has lost, but he will, eventually. It might take time for Bruce to realize what he has lost, but he will, eventually.
Emily ist nicht mehr so mitfühlend und aufopferungsvoll wie früher.
Emily is not as compassionate and self-sacrificing as she used to be. Emily is not as compassionate and self-sacrificing as she used to be.
Die Veränderung in Keris Fortschritt war so unbedeutend, dass es sich nicht lohnte, darüber zu sprechen.
The change in Carrie's progress was so insignificant that it wasn't worth talking about. The change in Carrie's progress was so insignificant that it wasn't worth talking about.
Einen neuen Job zu finden war eine vernünftige Entscheidung, da sie eindeutig von ihrem alten Chef ausgenutzt wurden.
Finding a new job was a reasonable choice, since you were clearly taken advantage of by your old boss. Finding a new job was a reasonable choice, since you were clearly taken advantage of by your old boss.
Selten sind die Momente in Archis Leben, in denen er nicht von Menschen umgeben ist.
Rare are the moments in Archie's life when he is not surrounded by people. Rare are the moments in Archie's life when he is not surrounded by people.
Du solltest Cameron besser nicht dadurch enttäuschen, indem du euren Urlaub in Madagaskar verschiebst.
You had better not disappoint Cameron by postponing your vacation in Madagascar. You had better not disappoint Cameron by postponing your vacation in Madagascar.
Wirst du dazu fähig sein, all den verlockenden Leckereien auf der Gartenparty zu widerstehen?
Will you be able to say no to all the tempting goodies at the garden party? Will you be able to say no to all the tempting goodies at the garden party?
Es ist schwierig, mit Stacy zusammenzuarbeiten, weil sie nicht anerkennen will, dass auch sie Fehler macht.
It is difficult to collaborate with Stacy because of her unwillingness to acknowledge that she, too, makes mistakes. It is difficult to collaborate with Stacy because of her unwillingness to acknowledge that she, too, makes mistakes.
Ihre Laktoseintoleranz erklärt ihre Zurückhaltung, Milchprodukte zu konsumieren.
Her lactose intolerance explains her reluctance to consume dairy products. Her lactose intolerance explains her reluctance to consume dairy products.
Ich habe bis Ende Juli genügend Zeit, um das neue Design meiner Küche zu planen.
I have sufficient time up to the end of July to plan the new design of my kitchen. I have sufficient time up to the end of July to plan the new design of my kitchen.
Es ist mir nicht ganz klar, ob ich das Geld jetzt überweisen soll oder für das Produkt bezahlen soll, wenn es geliefert wird.
It's not entirely clear to me whether I should transfer the money now or pay for the product when it's delivered. It's not entirely clear to me whether I should transfer the money now or pay for the product when it's delivered.
Der Konsum von gesunden Fetten, rohem Gemüse und Obst ist in Süd- und Westeuropa besonders verbreitet.
The consumption of healthy fats, raw vegetables and fruits is particularly prevalent in Southern and Western Europe. The consumption of healthy fats, raw vegetables and fruits is particularly prevalent in Southern and Western Europe.
Harold lehnte das Stellenangebot unter der Annahme ab, dass er in naher Zukunft ein besseres bekommen würde.
Harold turned down the job offer assuming that he would get a better one in the near future. Harold turned down the job offer assuming that he would get a better one in the near future.
Nun, zum einen ist deine Idee nicht ganz originell, und wir müssen Plagiate vermeiden.
Well, for one thing, your idea is not entirely original, and we have to avoid plagiarism. Well, for one thing, your idea is not entirely original, and we have to avoid plagiarism.
Eine hohe Aufnahme von synthetischen Vitaminen ist nicht nur unnötig, sondern auch potenziell schädlich.
A high intake of synthetic vitamins is not only unnecessary but also potentially harmful. A high intake of synthetic vitamins is not only unnecessary but also potentially harmful.
Die Wirksamkeit von Sonnenkollektoren hängt von vielen Faktoren ab.
The effectiveness of solar panels depends on many factors. The effectiveness of solar panels depends on many factors.
Ich bin während meines Urlaubs auf Mallorca überall mit einem gemieteten Fahrrad gefahren und habe auf diese Weise viel beim Transport gespart.
I rode a rented bicycle everywhere during my holiday in Mallorca, and saved a lot on transportation in this way. I rode a rented bicycle everywhere during my holiday in Mallorca, and saved a lot on transportation in this way.
Eine der Hauptmaßnahmen gegen die Ausdünnung der Ozonschicht war die Beseitigung der Verwendung von Freongasen in Aerosolen in den 1980er Jahren.
One of the main actions taken against the thinning of the ozone layer was eliminating the use of freon gases in aerosols in the 1980s. One of the main actions taken against the thinning of the ozone layer was eliminating the use of freon gases in aerosols in the 1980s.
Digitale Bücher können benutzerfreundlich sein, sie bieten jedoch nicht die gleiche Erfahrung wie echte Bücher.
Digital books can be user-friendly, however, they do not offer the same experience as real books. Digital books can be user-friendly, however, they do not offer the same experience as real books.
In dieser Region ist die Wahrscheinlichkeit von Vulkanausbrüchen gering.
There is little likelihood of any volcanic eruptions in this region. There is little likelihood of any volcanic eruptions in this region.
Als Optimistin nimmt sie auch unter den schlimmsten Umständen immer das Beste an.
Being an optimist, she always assumes the best even in the worst circumstances. Being an optimist, she always assumes the best even in the worst circumstances.
Ich möchte noch einmal betonen, wie wichtig es ist, alle bisher erlernten Materialien ständig zu wiederholen.
I would like to emphasize again the importance of constant revision of all the materials having been learnt so far. I would like to emphasize again the importance of constant revision of all the materials having been learnt so far.
Technologie in unserem digitalen Zeitalter ermöglicht es uns, auf alle von der Menschheit gesammelten Informationen zuzugreifen.
Technology in our digital age makes it possible for us to access all information accumulated by mankind. Technology in our digital age makes it possible for us to access all information accumulated by mankind.
Alle Altersgruppen in unserer Sprachschule sind an die einzigartigen Lernmethoden, die wir anwenden, gewöhnt.
All the age groups in our language school are accustomed to the unique learning methods we use. All the age groups in our language school are accustomed to the unique learning methods we use.
Jetzt müssen wir unsere Hypothese nur noch mit genügend Daten belegen.
All we have to do now is back up our hypothesis with enough data. All we have to do now is back up our hypothesis with enough data.
Dies ist das erste Mal, dass Sie jemals zu einem jüdischen Gottesdienst eingeladen wurden.
This is the first occasion they have ever been invited to a Jewish religious service. This is the first occasion they have ever been invited to a Jewish religious service.
Jenny kam um 4:30 im Verwaltungsbüro an, nur um herauszufinden, dass es bereits geschlossen war.
Jenny arrived at the administrative office at 4:30 only to find out that it had been closed already. Jenny arrived at the administrative office at 4:30 only to find out that it had been closed already.
Ich habe das irische Landleben noch nicht genug gesehen oder erlebt, um einen Artikel darüber zu schreiben.
I haven't seen or experienced enough of the Irish country life yet to write an article about it. I haven't seen or experienced enough of the Irish country life yet to write an article about it.
Bei ihren Marketing-Seminaren bringt sie immer wieder innovative Ideen zur Sprache.
She keeps bringing up innovative ideas at her marketing seminars. She keeps bringing up innovative ideas at her marketing seminars.
Der Gründer des Vereins schrieb diese Materialien mit der Absicht, Neulinge in der Region zu unterrichten.
The founder of the association wrote these materials with the intent of educating newcomers to the area. The founder of the association wrote these materials with the intent of educating newcomers to the area.
Lassen Sie mich zunächst sagen, dass es eine Ehre ist, Teil dieses Teams zu sein.
Let me start by saying that it's an honor to be part of this team. Let me start by saying that it's an honor to be part of this team.
Wenn man seinem Verstand negative Gedanken erlaubt, wirken sich diese auf unsere Handlungen aus.
If you let your mind give way to negative thoughts, they will affect your actions. If you let your mind give way to negative thoughts, they will affect your actions.
Es tut mir leid, dass ich letzte Nacht so unempfindlich gegenüber den Themen, über die wir gesprochen haben, war.
I am sorry I was so insensitive last night to the subjects we were talking about. I am sorry I was so insensitive last night to the subjects we were talking about.
Die Landwirte hatten ursprünglich beabsichtigt, beide Pestizide einzusetzen, aber später stellte sich heraus, dass dies unnötig war.
The farmers had initially intended to use both pesticides, but later it turned out to be unnecessary. The farmers had initially intended to use both pesticides, but later it turned out to be unnecessary.
Je höher die von dir eingenommene Position ist, desto höher sind die Erwartungen an dich, deine Emotionen zu kontrollieren.
The higher the position you fulfill, the higher the expectations for you to control your emotions. The higher the position you fulfill, the higher the expectations for you to control your emotions.
So oder so muss die ganze Hausarbeit erledigt sein, bevor wir nach Athen fahren.
One way or another, all the housework must be finished before we leave for Athens. One way or another, all the housework must be finished before we leave for Athens.
Körperliche Aktivität, sei es Sport, Gartenarbeit oder Klettern, beruhigt die Nerven.
Physical activity, be it sports, gardening or rock climbing, soothes the nerves. Physical activity, be it sports, gardening or rock climbing, soothes the nerves.
Die Nutzung von Windkraft als erneuerbare Energiequelle ist in diesem Gebiet nicht realisierbar, da es von hohen Hügeln umgeben ist.
Using the power of wind as a renewable energy resource is not viable in this area since it is surrounded by high hills. Using the power of wind as a renewable energy resource is not viable in this area since it is surrounded by high hills.
Sicherlich ist es eine von Elends größten Stärken, Menschen über die Erwartungen hinaus zu motivieren.
Certainly, it is one of Alan's greatest strengths to motivate people beyond expectations. Certainly, it is one of Alan's greatest strengths to motivate people beyond expectations.
Unsere belgischen Nachbarn haben aus Angst, dass sie es nicht richtig machen würden, einen Fachmann engagiert, der ihre Bäume im Obstgarten beschneidet.
Our Belgian neighbors got a professional to prune their trees in the orchard for fear that they wouldn't be able to do it the right way. Our Belgian neighbors got a professional to prune their trees in the orchard for fear that they wouldn't be able to do it the right way.
Budapest ist für sein spektakuläres Panorama, seine kulturellen Denkmäler und sein lebendiges Nachtleben bekannt.
Budapest is renowned for its spectacular panorama, cultural monuments, and vivid nightlife. Budapest is renowned for its spectacular panorama, cultural monuments, and vivid nightlife.
Zu guter Letzt möchten wir, dass unsere Kinder mehr Aktivitäten ausführen, die ihre zukünftige akademische Karriere vorantreiben.
Last but not least, we want our children to engage more in activities that will advance their future academic career. Last but not least, we want our children to engage more in activities that will advance their future academic career.
Eine große Anzahl von Paaren zögert, Hilfe zu suchen, wenn es um Beziehungsprobleme geht.
A great amount of couples feel reluctant to seek assistance when it comes to relationship issues. A great amount of couples feel reluctant to seek assistance when it comes to relationship issues.
Pflanzenfresser ernähren sich ausschließlich von Pflanzen, während Allesfresser auch Tiere verzehren.
Herbivores feed exclusively on plants, while omnivores also consume animals. Herbivores feed exclusively on plants, while omnivores also consume animals.
Wenn du jeden Tag 8 Stunden Schlaf hast, kannst du die verbleibenden 2/3 deines Tages effektiv nutzen.
Getting 8 hours of sleep every day enables you to make use of the remaining 2/3 of your day effectively. Getting 8 hours of sleep every day enables you to make use of the remaining 2/3 of your day effectively.
Caitlin will mit niemandem reden, wie sehr wir auch versuchen, sie zu überzeugen.
Kathleen won't talk to anyone however hard we are trying to convince her. Kathleen won't talk to anyone however hard we are trying to convince her.
Dieses Experiment hat mir beigebracht, wie man Chemikalien mischt, um das beste Ergebnis zu erzielen.
This experiment has taught me how to mix chemicals to get the best outcome. This experiment has taught me how to mix chemicals to get the best outcome.
Diese beiden Fotos sind nicht identisch, wie ähnlich sie auch sein mögen.
These two photos aren't identical, however similar they seem to be. These two photos aren't identical, however similar they seem to be.
Zusätzlich dazu, dass sie die meiste Zeit ihrer Arbeit widmete, beschloss Jackie, ein Hobby auszuüben.
In addition to committing most of her time to work, Jackie decided to take up a hobby. In addition to committing most of her time to work, Jackie decided to take up a hobby.
Ich kann nicht sicher sagen, ob Bob diese Aufgabe in so kurzer Zeit erledigen kann.
I can't say for sure whether Bob can complete this task in such a short amount of time. I can't say for sure whether Bob can complete this task in such a short amount of time.
Was mir an diesem Sommercamp am besten gefällt, ist, dass Kinder sich die ganze Woche über mit einheimischen Franzosen unterhalten können.
What I most like about this summer camp is that children can converse with native French people during the whole week. What I most like about this summer camp is that children can converse with native French people during the whole week.
Ohne seine starke Vision, die auch sein Team motivierte, wären sie nicht erfolgreich gewesen.
Without his strong vision, which also motivated his team, they wouldn't have been able to succeed. Without his strong vision, which also motivated his team, they wouldn't have been able to succeed.
Louis freute sich auf den Tag, an dem er finanziell unabhängig sein würde.
Louis was looking forward to the day he would be independent financially. Louis was looking forward to the day he would be independent financially.
Ich war absolut begeistert zu hören, dass meine Freundin von der Regierung Finanzmittel für die Gründung ihres Start-up-Unternehmens erhalten hat.
I was absolutely thrilled to hear that my friend got funding from the government to launch her startup company. I was absolutely thrilled to hear that my friend got funding from the government to launch her startup company.
Wenn du vor einer schwierigen Entscheidung stehst, konzentriere dich immer auf die bestmögliche Lösung.
When facing a tough decision, always focus your mind on the best possible solution. When facing a tough decision, always focus your mind on the best possible solution.
Es macht nicht immer Sinn, was sie sagt, aber ich vertraue ihren Fähigkeiten.
It doesn't always make sense what she says, but I trust her abilities. It doesn't always make sense what she says, but I trust her abilities.
Es ist einfach, sich mit vielen der Charaktere in dieser Serie zu identifizieren, da es sich um durchschnittliche Personen handelt.
It's easy to identify with many of the characters in this series because they are average people. It's easy to identify with many of the characters in this series because they are average people.
Multitasking ist im 21. Jahrhundert ein Muss, wenn Sie mit den neuen Fortschritten in der Welt mithalten möchten.
Multitasking is a must in the 21st century if you want to keep up with new advancements in the world. Multitasking is a must in the 21st century if you want to keep up with new advancements in the world.
Keiner von ihnen wusste um die Risiken, die mit dieser Art von Sport verbunden waren.
Neither of them knew about the risks involved in this kind of sport. Neither of them knew about the risks involved in this kind of sport.
Nora hat nachweislich, in gewisser Weise, an der Planung des Verbrechens mitgewirkt.
Nora is proved to have participated in some ways in setting up the crime. Nora is proved to have participated in some ways in setting up the crime.
Um ehrlich zu sein, ist das nicht der erste Vorfall im Zusammenhang mit Mitarbeitern, den wir in letzter Zeit erlebt haben.
To be honest, this isn't the first staff-related incident that we have experienced recently. To be honest, this isn't the first staff-related incident that we have experienced recently.
Wilson und Marilyn waren immens begeistert von der Nachricht, zum zweiten Mal Großeltern zu werden.
Wilson and Marilyn were immensely excited by the news of becoming grandparents for the second time. Wilson and Marilyn were immensely excited by the news of becoming grandparents for the second time.
Wenn Sie Ihre Stelle alle paar Jahre ändern, können Sie Einblicke in mehrere Bereiche gewinnen, die für Sie sonst nicht zugänglich wären.
By changing your position every few years, you can gain insight into several areas that otherwise would be inaccessible for you. By changing your position every few years, you can gain insight into several areas that otherwise would be inaccessible for you.
Wenn die Burtons in den Urlaub fahren, planen sie nie im Voraus. Sie entscheiden spontan, wo sie bleiben möchten.
When going on holiday, the Burtons never plan ahead, they decide spontaneously where they want to stay. When going on holiday, the Burtons never plan ahead, they decide spontaneously where they want to stay.
In bestimmten Ländern hat sich die Rate des Cybershoppings in den letzten 5 Jahren verdoppelt.
The rate of cyber shopping doubled in certain countries in the last 5 years. The rate of cyber shopping doubled in certain countries in the last 5 years.
Im Gegensatz zu den 1980er Jahren, als die Auswahl an Lebensmitteln in Geschäften sehr begrenzt war, sind die Supermarktregale heute mit Produkten überladen.
As opposed to the 1980s, when the selection of food in stores was very limited, supermarket shelves today are overloaded with products. As opposed to the 1980s, when the selection of food in stores was very limited, supermarket shelves today are overloaded with products.
Ich glaube nicht, dass das Treffen mit dem Botschafter gewöhnlich war, im Gegenteil, es war ein außergewöhnlicher Anlass für uns alle.
I don't think meeting with the ambassador was ordinary, on the contrary, it was an exceptional occasion for all of us. I don't think meeting with the ambassador was ordinary, on the contrary, it was an exceptional occasion for all of us.
Seine Bemerkungen mögen manchmal provokativ gewesen sein, aber sie waren definitiv konstruktiv.
His remarks might have been provocative at times, but they were definitely constructive. His remarks might have been provocative at times, but they were definitely constructive.
Diese Zahlen deuten eindeutig auf einen Fachkräftemangel von Frauen in der Gastronomie hin.
These numbers clearly indicate a shortage of women hired by the catering industry. These numbers clearly indicate a shortage of women hired by the catering industry.
Sie macht immer einen entschiedenen Eindruck, aber ich weiß, dass sie ihre Verwundbarkeit einfach nur versteckt.
She always gives the impression of being very decisive, but I know she is simply hiding her vulnerability. She always gives the impression of being very decisive, but I know she is simply hiding her vulnerability.
Ihr Aufenthalt in Rumänien war eine Übergangszeit, die es ihnen ermöglichte, sich an die europäische Lebensweise zu gewöhnen.
Their stay in Romania was a time of transition that enabled them to get accustomed to the European way of life. Their stay in Romania was a time of transition that enabled them to get accustomed to the European way of life.
Der moralische Hintergrund der Sterbehilfe ist ein heiß diskutiertes Thema.
The moral background of euthanasia is a hotly debated subject. The moral background of euthanasia is a hotly debated subject.
In diesem Sinne könnten wir auch sagen, dass das, was sie behaupten, nicht unbedingt wahr ist.
In this sense, we could also say that what they claim is not necessarily true. In this sense, we could also say that what they claim is not necessarily true.
Die Senkung hoher Steuern sollte für die Führer unserer Nation als Präzedenzfall dienen.
Cutting back on high taxes should serve as a precedent for our nation's leaders. Cutting back on high taxes should serve as a precedent for our nation's leaders.
Zeitschriften richten sich explizit an bestimmte Zielgruppen wie Hausfrauen, Autoliebhaber oder Finanzexperten.
Magazines are targeted explicitly at particular audiences such as homemakers, car lovers, or financial experts. Magazines are targeted explicitly at particular audiences such as homemakers, car lovers, or financial experts.
Sympathie, Toleranz, Selbstlosigkeit und Empathie sind geschätzte Werte.
Sympathy, tolerance, selflessness, and empathy are cherished values. Sympathy, tolerance, selflessness, and empathy are cherished values.
Kirchen spielen auf der ganzen Welt eine prominente Rolle bei der Unterstützung von Opfern von Naturkatastrophen und der Bekämpfung von Armut.
Churches all over the world play a prominent role in supporting victims of natural disasters and alleviating poverty. Churches all over the world play a prominent role in supporting victims of natural disasters and alleviating poverty.
Spenden an Wohltätigkeitsorganisationen oder die Unterstützung von Personen unterhalb der Armutsgrenze sollten für alle Bürger unseres Landes selbstverständlich sein.
Donating to charities or supporting individuals below the poverty line should be natural to all citizens of our country. Donating to charities or supporting individuals below the poverty line should be natural to all citizens of our country.
Ungefähr 10 der 50 politischen Initiationen wurden genehmigt.
Approximately 10 of the 50 political initiations have been approved. Approximately 10 of the 50 political initiations have been approved.
Auch für hochqualifizierte Menschen besteht die Möglichkeit, manchmal entlassen zu werden.
Highly qualified people may also face the challenges of being laid off at times. Highly qualified people may also face the challenges of being laid off at times.
Nur weil wir Wunder nicht verstehen können, heißt das nicht, dass es keine Erklärung dafür gibt.
Simply because we are unable to comprehend miracles, it does not mean that there is no explanation for them. Simply because we are unable to comprehend miracles, it does not mean that there is no explanation for them.
Auf mein zuvor veröffentlichtes Kochbuch zu verweisen, Vincent beschrieb eine vegane Mahlzeit, die er daraus gemacht hatte.
Referring back to my previously published cookbook, Vincent described a vegan meal he had made from it. Referring back to my previously published cookbook, Vincent described a vegan meal he had made from it.
Gibt es irgendwelche Möglichkeiten, mit denen wir die Anzahl der interaktiven Lernaktivitäten in diesem Kindergarten erhöhen könnten?
Are there any ways we could increase the number of interactive learning activities in this kindergarten? Are there any ways we could increase the number of interactive learning activities in this kindergarten?
Sie versuchten, alle Schulden, die sie der Bank schuldeten, durch den Verkauf ihrer Oldtimer zurückzuzahlen.
They tried to repay all the debts they owed the bank by way of selling one of their vintage cars. They tried to repay all the debts they owed the bank by way of selling one of their vintage cars.
Überall auf der Welt treten ungewöhnliche Naturphänomene auf.
Unusual natural phenomena occur everywhere around the globe. Unusual natural phenomena occur everywhere around the globe.
Der Arzt warnte seinen Patienten, dass Alkohol die Wirksamkeit seiner Medikamente beeinträchtigen kann.
The doctor warned his patient that alcohol can diminish the efficiency of his medication. The doctor warned his patient that alcohol can diminish the efficiency of his medication.
Der freie internationale Handel hat Groß- und Einzelhändlern immer hervorragende Aussichten geboten, ihre Produkte außerhalb ihres eigenen Landes zu verkaufen.
Free international trade has always offered brilliant prospects for wholesalers and retailers to sell their products outside their own countries. Free international trade has always offered brilliant prospects for wholesalers and retailers to sell their products outside their own countries.
Marketing im Internet ist vergleichsweise kostengünstiger als das Verteilen von Flugblättern und anderen Drucksachen.
Marketing on the Internet is comparatively more cost-effective than distributing leaflets and other printed materials. Marketing on the Internet is comparatively more cost-effective than distributing leaflets and other printed materials.
Trotz seiner Verbindungen zu hohen Kreisen, konnte der CEO nicht ungeschoren davonkommen und wurde in einen Korruptionsfall verwickelt.
Despite his connections in high circles, the CEO could not get away with getting mixed up in a corruption case. Despite his connections in high circles, the CEO could not get away with getting mixed up in a corruption case.
Wann immer Nicholas seine Gedanken von der Arbeit ablenken will, macht er mit seinem Freund ein paar Stunden lang Nordic Walking.
Whenever Nicholas wants to take his mind off work, he goes Nordic walking with his friend for a few hours. Whenever Nicholas wants to take his mind off work, he goes Nordic walking with his friend for a few hours.
Nach wochenlanger anstrengender geistiger Arbeit machen sie monatliche Kurzurlaube, um neue Kräfte zu tanken.
They go on monthly mini vacations to recharge after doing weeks of strenuous mental work. They go on monthly mini vacations to recharge after doing weeks of strenuous mental work.
Die Entnahme von Blut aus der Nabelschnur kann bei der Behandlung genetischer Störungen enorm hilfreich sein.
Removing blood from the umbilical cord can be tremendously helpful in treating genetic disorders. Removing blood from the umbilical cord can be tremendously helpful in treating genetic disorders.
Viele der westeuropäischen Hotels, in denen sie bisher waren, waren Hightech, es fehlte nicht an Luxus.
Many of the Western European hotels they have been to so far were high-tech, not lacking any luxury. Many of the Western European hotels they have been to so far were high-tech, not lacking any luxury.
Die Qualität der Schulmahlzeiten gibt Anlass zur Sorge, und Ernährungswissenschaftler fordern, dass gesündere Lebensmittel ins Menü aufgenommen werden.
The quality of school meals raises concerns, and nutritionists urge that more healthy foods be introduced into menus. The quality of school meals raises concerns, and nutritionists urge that more healthy foods be introduced into menus.
Trotz aller Bemühungen wird es noch mindestens 2 Monate dauern, bis die neue Schnellstraße fertig ist.
Despite all the efforts, it will still take at least 2 more months for the new expressway to be ready. Despite all the efforts, it will still take at least 2 more months for the new expressway to be ready.
Ich erklärte ihm, wie prekär unsere Situation war, aber er verstand es trotzdem noch nicht.
I explained to him how precarious our situation was, but he was still not getting the point. I explained to him how precarious our situation was, but he was still not getting the point.
Unabhängig davon, für welchen Artikel Sie werben, stellen Sie sicher, dass Sie Ihr Produkt objektiv, aber auf ansprechende Weise beschreiben.
Whatever item you advertise, be sure to describe your product objectively but in an appealing manner. Whatever item you advertise, be sure to describe your product objectively but in an appealing manner.
Unterschiedliche Emotionen aktivieren verschiedene Bereiche Ihres Gehirns, es wird daher empfohlen, sich auf mehrere soziale Interaktionen einzulassen.
Different emotions activate different areas of your brain, so it is recommended to get involved in multiple social interactions. Different emotions activate different areas of your brain, so it is recommended to get involved in multiple social interactions.
Auch wenn wir die Korruption nicht von einem Tag auf den anderen stoppen können, können wir immer Wege finden, sie zu kontrollieren.
Even though we can't stop corruption from one day to the next, we can always find ways to keep a check on it. Even though we can't stop corruption from one day to the next, we can always find ways to keep a check on it.
Ich hatte mich wirklich darauf gefreut, mit unseren Freunden zu grillen, aber sie haben es wegen eines unerwarteten Ereignisses aufgeschoben.
I had really been looking forward to barbecuing with our friends, but they put it off due to an unexpected event. I had really been looking forward to barbecuing with our friends, but they put it off due to an unexpected event.
Wirtschaftswissenschaftler mit Universitätsabschluss haben eine Vielzahl von Möglichkeiten zur Auswahl.
Economists with a university degree have a wide range of opportunities to choose from. Economists with a university degree have a wide range of opportunities to choose from.
Warum glaubst du, dass es nur eine begrenzte Anzahl von Exemplaren dieses Lehrbuchs im Buchladen gibt?
What makes you think that there's only a limited number of copies of this textbook available in the bookstore? What makes you think that there's only a limited number of copies of this textbook available in the bookstore?
Graces Intuition führte sie zur besten Entscheidung ihres Lebens.
Grace's intuition led her to the best decision of her life. Grace's intuition led her to the best decision of her life.
Jetzt, wo du einen Führerschein hast, kannst du genauso gut alleine in die Türkei fahren.
Now that you have a driver's license, you might as well drive to Turkey alone. Now that you have a driver's license, you might as well drive to Turkey alone.
Warum hat er mich seit Jahren vernachlässigt und will jetzt mein bester Freund werden?
Why is it that he has been neglecting me for years and now he wants to become my best friend? Why is it that he has been neglecting me for years and now he wants to become my best friend?
Ich liebe Bücher, die zum Nachdenken anregen und mich über die großen Fragen des Lebens nachdenken lassen.
I love thought-provoking books that make me think about the great questions of life. I love thought-provoking books that make me think about the great questions of life.
Ich kann dir nicht sagen, was für ein großes Privileg es war, in Jamaika aufzuwachsen.
I can't tell you what a great privilege it was to be growing up in Jamaica. I can't tell you what a great privilege it was to be growing up in Jamaica.
Je mehr ich darüber nachdenke, was du mir erzählt hast, desto mehr verstehe ich, was du meinst.
The more I think about what you told me, the more I understand what you meant. The more I think about what you told me, the more I understand what you meant.
Cornelia ist die Art von Anwältin, die immer Hindernisse überwindet, auch wenn alle Chancen gegen sie stehen.
Cornelia is the kind of attorney who always overcomes obstacles even when all odds are against her. Cornelia is the kind of attorney who always overcomes obstacles even when all odds are against her.
Fish and Chips ist seit langem ein großer Favorit der britischen Bürger, aber es ist eine Spezialität für ausländische Besucher in England.
Fish and chips has long been a big favorite of British citizens, but it is a speciality for foreign visitors in England. Fish and chips has long been a big favorite of British citizens, but it is a speciality for foreign visitors in England.
Theoretisch ist es machbar, in der Praxis jedoch kann es einige Tage dauern, bis wir eine Aufgabe dieser Größe erledigt haben.
In theory, it is doable. However, in practice, it may take quite a few days for us to complete a task this size. In theory, it is doable. However, in practice, it may take quite a few days for us to complete a task this size.
Es ist bloßer Unsinn, die Leute glauben zu lassen, dass dieses Produkt ihre Kopfschmerzen für immer beseitigen wird.
It is just nonsense to make people believe that this product will eliminate their headaches forever. It is just nonsense to make people believe that this product will eliminate their headaches forever.
Jede Form der Desinfektion wäre von entscheidender Bedeutung, insbesondere in Ländern, in denen nicht überall sanitäre Einrichtungen verfügbar sind.
Any form of disinfection would be of vital importance, especially in countries where sanitary facilities are not available everywhere. Any form of disinfection would be of vital importance, especially in countries where sanitary facilities are not available everywhere.
Soweit es Hunde betrifft, bedeutet Trennungsangst, dass sie es nicht tolerieren können, ohne ihre Besitzer zu sein.
In case of dogs, separation anxiety means they cannot tolerate being without their owners. In case of dogs, separation anxiety means they cannot tolerate being without their owners.
Es gibt keine Worte, um die Vielfalt der ethnischen Gruppen in Tansania zu beschreiben.
There are no words to describe the diversity of Tanzania's ethnic groups. There are no words to describe the diversity of Tanzania's ethnic groups.
Welche Schönheit sie in Positano sahen, war weit jenseits ihrer wildesten Vorstellungskraft.
What beauty they saw in Positano was far beyond their wildest imagination. What beauty they saw in Positano was far beyond their wildest imagination.
Es gibt eindeutig eine Ursache dafür, dass er die ganze Zeit vergesslich ist.
There is clearly an underlying cause behind him being forgetful all the time. There is clearly an underlying cause behind him being forgetful all the time.
Angesichts dessen, was er durchgemacht hat, ist es nicht verwunderlich, dass Brad die laufenden Bauarbeiten in Frankfurt nicht überwachen kann.
Given everything he has gone through, it's not surprising that Brat is not going to be able to oversee the ongoing construction work in Frankfurt. Given everything he has gone through, it's not surprising that Brat is not going to be able to oversee the ongoing construction work in Frankfurt.
Es war mir völlig entgangen, dass mein Reisepass abgelaufen war, also musste ich in Eile einen neuen machen lassen.
It completely slipped my mind that my passport had expired, so I had to have a new one made in a rush. It completely slipped my mind that my passport had expired, so I had to have a new one made in a rush.
Ich bezweifle sehr, dass ich es schaffen werde, alles in diesem Film mit meinen Grundkenntnissen in Chinesisch zu verstehen.
I highly doubt that I will manage to understand everything in this movie with my basic level Chinese knowledge. I highly doubt that I will manage to understand everything in this movie with my basic level Chinese knowledge.
Eines ist sicher, wenn man komplexe Sätze bilden möchte, muss man so viele zusätzliche Informationen wie möglich verwenden.
One thing is for sure, if you want to form complex sentences, you will have to use as much additional information in them as you can. One thing is for sure, if you want to form complex sentences, you will have to use as much additional information in them as you can.
Im Moment gibt es keine Mietwohnung, von der ich wüsste.
There's no apartment for rent that I know of at the moment. There's no apartment for rent that I know of at the moment.
Das Fazit lautet, dass wenn man einen MBA, Master of Business Administration, machen möchte, man zuerst einen Bachelorabschluss erwerben muss.
The bottom line is that if you want to do an MBA, Master of Business Administration, you will first need to obtain a bachelor's degree. The bottom line is that if you want to do an MBA, Master of Business Administration, you will first need to obtain a bachelor's degree.
Wir haben diese Art von Arbeit noch nie gemacht. Deshalb brauchen wir eine gut funktionierende Strategie.
We have never done this type of job before, therefore, we need a well-functioning strategy. We have never done this type of job before, therefore, we need a well-functioning strategy.
Buchstaben bilden Wörter und Wörter sind die Grundbausteine eines jeden geschriebenen Textes.
Letters make up words and words are the basic building blocks of any written text. Letters make up words and words are the basic building blocks of any written text.
Grüne Smoothies sind zum Inbegriff von Superfoods des 21. Jahrhunderts geworden.
Green smoothies have become the quintessential superfoods of the 21st century. Green smoothies have become the quintessential superfoods of the 21st century.
Die Geschichte beginnt an einem wunderschönen Sommertag in einer typisch englischen ländlichen Umgebung, irgendwann gegen Ende des 19. Jahrhunderts.
The story begins on a beautiful summer day in a quintessentially English rural setting, sometime around the end of the 19th century. The story begins on a beautiful summer day in a quintessentially English rural setting, sometime around the end of the 19th century.
Ich liebe es, Biografien von Künstlern, Wissenschaftlern und Politikern zu lesen, die nicht nur unsere Zivilisation verändert haben, sondern auch ein vorbildliches Leben geführt haben.
I love reading biographies of artists, scientists and politicians who not only changed our civilization but also led an exemplary life. I love reading biographies of artists, scientists and politicians who not only changed our civilization but also led an exemplary life.
So absurd es auch erscheinen mag, es sieht so aus, als hätte ich eine beträchtliche Menge Geld bei der Lotterie gewonnen.
However absurd it might seem, it looks like I've won a considerable amount of money on the lottery. However absurd it might seem, it looks like I've won a considerable amount of money on the lottery.
Ich erneuere mein Abonnement für dieses DIY-Magazin jährlich.
I renew my subscription for this DIY magazine annually. I renew my subscription for this DIY magazine annually.
Sollten die Kosten höher als dieser Betrag steigen, zögern Sie nicht, mich anzurufen.
Should the costs rise higher than this amount, don't hesitate to call me. Should the costs rise higher than this amount, don't hesitate to call me.
Nach ihrem Temperament zu urteilen, muss diese Frau entweder Italienerin oder Spanierin sein.
Judging by her temperament, this woman must be either Italian or Spanish. Judging by her temperament, this woman must be either Italian or Spanish.
Dein Verstand ist ein unglaublich mächtiges Werkzeug, das deine negativen Gefühle kontrollieren kann, aber es liegt bei dir, ob du lernst es zu benutzen.
Your mind is an incredibly powerful tool that is able to control your negative feelings, but it's up to you whether you learn to use it. Your mind is an incredibly powerful tool that is able to control your negative feelings, but it's up to you whether you learn to use it.
Unsere Reaktion auf dieselben äußeren Reize variiert individuell.
Our reaction to the same outside stimuli varies individually. Our reaction to the same outside stimuli varies individually.
Logan ist intuitiv und klug, deshalb würde ich ihn wählen, um mir zu helfen, mich um die Tiere im Zoo zu kümmern.
Logan is intuitive and smart, that is why I would choose him to help me care for the animals in the zoo. Logan is intuitive and smart, that is why I would choose him to help me care for the animals in the zoo.
Die Vorteile, die Sie durch diese Art von Kampfsport erzielen können, werden die Nachteile bei weitem überwiegen.
The benefits you can gain from doing this type of combat sport will far outweigh its drawbacks. The benefits you can gain from doing this type of combat sport will far outweigh its drawbacks.
Einige der einflussreichsten Menschen in der Geschichte der Menschheit haben große Opfer gebracht, um einen Unterschied in dieser Welt zu bewirken.
Some of the most influential people in human history have made huge sacrifices to make a difference in this world. Some of the most influential people in human history have made huge sacrifices to make a difference in this world.
Die geistige Klarheit und Witzigkeit, die meine Urgroßmutter Margaret zeigt, widerspricht ihrem Alter.
The mental clarity and wittiness my great-grandmother Margaret displays belies her age. The mental clarity and wittiness my great-grandmother Margaret displays belies her age.
Zufriedenheit und Geduld sind heutzutage seltene Eigenschaften.
Contentment and patience are rare qualities today. Contentment and patience are rare qualities today.
Isabella lehnte freundlich und höflich, die Hauptrolle in Romeo und Julia zu übernehmen, ab, da ihr bereits eine geeignetere Rolle am Broadway angeboten worden war.
Isabella kindly and politely refused to take the lead role in Romeo and Juliet because she had already been offered a more suitable role on Broadway. Isabella kindly and politely refused to take the lead role in Romeo and Juliet because she had already been offered a more suitable role on Broadway.
Möchten Sie, dass der Webdesigner bis Donnerstagmorgen mit den Plänen fertig ist?
Do you want the web designer to be finished with the plans by Thursday morning? Do you want the web designer to be finished with the plans by Thursday morning?
Ich wollte ihn nicht verärgern, er war derjenige, der nach meiner Meinung gefragt hat.
I didn't mean to upset him, he was the one who asked for my opinion. I didn't mean to upset him, he was the one who asked for my opinion.
Ich konnte fühlen, wie jemand sanft meine Schulter berührte.
I could feel somebody touching my shoulder gently. I could feel somebody touching my shoulder gently.
Was die Polizei im Begriff ist einzuführen, könnte die Situation der Fahrer tatsächlich erschweren.
What the police is about to introduce might actually complicate the situation of drivers. What the police is about to introduce might actually complicate the situation of drivers.
Wenn Sie gerne mit neuen Lebensmitteln experimentieren, empfehle ich Ihnen dieses Simit-Rezept, das ich kürzlich entdeckt habe.
If you like experimenting with new foods, let me recommend you this Simit recipe I've recently discovered. If you like experimenting with new foods, let me recommend you this Simit recipe I've recently discovered.
Simit ist ein köstliches, süßes, bagelartiges griechisches Nationalgericht, das mit Sesam übersät ist.
Simit is a delicious, sweet, bagel-like Greek national food covered with sesame seeds. Simit is a delicious, sweet, bagel-like Greek national food covered with sesame seeds.
Ich habe versucht, Paul zu finden, ich traf jedoch alle außer ihm.
I was trying to find Paul, however, I met everybody except for him. I was trying to find Paul, however, I met everybody except for him.
Ich war schon immer fasziniert von der Aussicht, die ich beim Fliegen über den Wolken sehen kann.
I have always been captivated by the view I can see when flying above the clouds. I have always been captivated by the view I can see when flying above the clouds.
Sie dachten, sie würden nie wieder die Chance haben, Alaska zu sehen, also nutzten sie die Gelegenheit und blieben noch eine Woche in Fairbanks.
They thought they would never have the chance to see Alaska again, so they took the opportunity and stayed for one more week in Fairbanks. They thought they would never have the chance to see Alaska again, so they took the opportunity and stayed for one more week in Fairbanks.
Alles in allem würde ich sagen, dass Hybridautos in den stärker entwickelten europäischen Ländern ziemlich häufig genutzt werden.
All things considered, I would say that the use of hybrid cars is fairly common in the more developed European countries. All things considered, I would say that the use of hybrid cars is fairly common in the more developed European countries.
Wir sind zu meiner Zeit nicht so viel gereist.
We didn't used to travel so much in my days. We didn't used to travel so much in my days.
Generation Z ist leistungsorientiert und voller kreativer Ideen und unbegrenzter Perspektiven, um ihre Träume zu erfüllen.
Generation Z is achievement-oriented and full of creative ideas and unlimited prospects to fulfill their dreams. Generation Z is achievement-oriented and full of creative ideas and unlimited prospects to fulfill their dreams.
Finanzieller Wohlstand kann sich im Zugang zu einem gesünderen Lebensstil und besseren Schulmöglichkeiten für Kinder manifestieren.
Financial prosperity can manifest itself in access to a healthier lifestyle and better schooling opportunities for children. Financial prosperity can manifest itself in access to a healthier lifestyle and better schooling opportunities for children.
Diese Arten haben eines gemeinsam: sie können mehrere Tage ohne Wasser auskommen.
These species have one thing in common: they can do without water for several days. These species have one thing in common: they can do without water for several days.
Aus irgendeinem Grund wollten sie mir die Informationen, die ich dringend brauchte, nicht geben.
For some reason, they would not give me the information I urgently needed. For some reason, they would not give me the information I urgently needed.
Der Eintritt zur Aufführung des Knabenchors in der Kirche ist kostenlos.
Admission to the performance of the boys' choir at the church will be free of charge. Admission to the performance of the boys' choir at the church will be free of charge.
Jensens Erziehung hinderte ihn daran, die Grenze des Anstands zu überschreiten.
Jensen's upbringing prevented him from crossing the line of decency. Jensen's upbringing prevented him from crossing the line of decency.
Ich möchte keine Schlussfolgerung ziehen, bis ich beide Seiten der Geschichte gehört habe.
I don't want to draw a conclusion until I have heard both sides of the story. I don't want to draw a conclusion until I have heard both sides of the story.
Wenn man in einer Gruppe lernt, kann es viele Ablenkungen geben, was es einem schwer machen kann, sich zu konzentrieren.
If you study in a group, there can be too many distractions, which makes it hard for you to concentrate. If you study in a group, there can be too many distractions, which makes it hard for you to concentrate.
Ich wusste vom ersten Moment an, dass Leslie mein Ehemann werden würde.
I knew from the first moment that Leslie would be my husband. I knew from the first moment that Leslie would be my husband.
Ich bin viel effizienter in meinem Job, wenn ich alleine arbeite.
I am much more efficient at my job if I work on my own. I am much more efficient at my job if I work on my own.
Als Brian in eine andere Abteilung verlegt wurde, ließ er seinen Bericht unvollendet, also musste ich ihn vorbereiten.
When Brian was relocated to another department, he left his report unfinished, so I had to prepare it. When Brian was relocated to another department, he left his report unfinished, so I had to prepare it.
Ich habe mit humanitären Organisationen zusammengearbeitet, weswegen ich nach einer Weile ein Experte darin geworden bin, wie man Menschen zum Spenden überredet.
I worked with humanitarian organizations, so after a while I became an expert on how to persuade people to donate. I worked with humanitarian organizations, so after a while I became an expert on how to persuade people to donate.
Freiwilligenprogramme sind eine großartige Möglichkeit für junge Menschen, ihren Horizont über die Welt zu erweitern.
Volunteer programs are a great means for young people to widen their horizons about the world. Volunteer programs are a great means for young people to widen their horizons about the world.
Die Betreuung kranker Kinder in Kenia war für Watson ein Sprungbrett, um Kinderarzt zu werden.
Taking care of sick children in Kenya was a stepping stone for Watson to becoming a pediatrician. Taking care of sick children in Kenya was a stepping stone for Watson to becoming a pediatrician.
Von Princeton aufgenommen zu werden, ebnete ihr den Weg 5 Jahre später ihre eigene Praxis als Psychologin zu eröffnen.
Getting into Princeton paved the way for her to open her own practice as a psychologist 5 years later. Getting into Princeton paved the way for her to open her own practice as a psychologist 5 years later.
Auf dem Gebiet der Krebsforschung besteht Bedarf an radikalen Veränderungen, aber es nimmt viel Zeit in Anspruch und erfordert viel Geduld.
There's a need for radical change in the field of cancer research, but it takes a lot of time and requires a lot of patience. There's a need for radical change in the field of cancer research, but it takes a lot of time and requires a lot of patience.
Ich wünschte, ich könnte jederzeit improvisieren, wenn ich keine Zeit habe, mich im Voraus vorzubereiten.
I wish I could improvise anytime I don't have time to prepare in advance. I wish I could improvise anytime I don't have time to prepare in advance.
Sie war sich der Tatsache nicht bewusst, dass der einzige Grund, warum sie in dieser Position war, ihre Sorgfalt war.
She wasn't aware of the fact that the only reason she was in that position was her diligence. She wasn't aware of the fact that the only reason she was in that position was her diligence.
Abgase sollten keine Schwermetallkonzentration über einem bestimmten Niveau enthalten.
Exhaustion gases should not contain heavy metal concentration above a certain level. Exhaustion gases should not contain heavy metal concentration above a certain level.
Camille leistete mir Gesellschaft, während ich nervös auf meine Bluttestergebnisse wartete.
Camille kept me company while I was nervously waiting for my blood test results. Camille kept me company while I was nervously waiting for my blood test results.
Ich behandle alle Menschen gleich, unabhängig von Alter, Geschlecht oder sozialer Stellung.
I treat all people the same way regardless of their age, sex, or social standing. I treat all people the same way regardless of their age, sex, or social standing.
Connor ist ein guter Onkel, aber ein noch besserer Ehemann, der sich perfekt um seine Frau kümmert.
Connor is a good uncle but an even better husband who takes perfect care of his wife. Connor is a good uncle but an even better husband who takes perfect care of his wife.
Setzen Sie sich jede Woche realistische und erreichbare Ziele und belohnen Sie sich, wenn Sie diese erreichen.
Set yourself realistic and achievable goals every week and reward yourself when you reach them. Set yourself realistic and achievable goals every week and reward yourself when you reach them.
Ich habe die Tendenz, zweimal nachzusehen, ob der Herd ausgeschaltet ist, bevor wir in den Urlaub fahren.
I have a tendency to check whether the cooker is off 2 times before we leave for our holiday. I have a tendency to check whether the cooker is off 2 times before we leave for our holiday.
Mit Sauerteig zubereitete Backwaren sind mit nützlichen Bakterien beladen, die einen erstaunlichen Effekt auf ihre Verdauung haben.
Bakery products prepared with sourdough are loaded with beneficial bacteria that have an amazing effect on your digestion. Bakery products prepared with sourdough are loaded with beneficial bacteria that have an amazing effect on your digestion.
Ich erzähle dir das aus Erfahrung.
I'm telling you this from experience. I'm telling you this from experience.
Für viele Menschen ist es fraglich, ob Abtreibung moralisch richtig oder falsch ist.
For many people it is arguable whether abortion is morally right or wrong. For many people it is arguable whether abortion is morally right or wrong.
Zum ersten Mal in meinem Leben habe ich das Gefühl, etwas Sinnvolles und Erfreuliches zu tun.
For the first time in my life I feel I am doing something meaningful and gratifying. For the first time in my life I feel I am doing something meaningful and gratifying.
Ich habe mich in den letzten Jahren an Islands eiskaltes Klima gewöhnt.
I have gotten used to Iceland's freezing cold climate over the last few years. I have gotten used to Iceland's freezing cold climate over the last few years.
Laut Forschung sind hormonelle Veränderungen für das unangenehme Verhalten von Jugendlichen verantwortlich.
According to research, hormonal changes are responsible for adolescents' awkward behavior. According to research, hormonal changes are responsible for adolescents' awkward behavior.
Wenn Sie etwas Kreatives für Ihren Lebensunterhalt tun, können Sie nicht nur Geld verdienen und das Leben anderer verbessern, sondern auch Ihr Selbstvertrauen stärken.
Doing something creative for a living can not only earn you money and make others' lives better but can also boost your self-confidence. Doing something creative for a living can not only earn you money and make others' lives better but can also boost your self-confidence.
Schmerzhafte Erfahrungen im Leben zu machen, macht uns zu widerstandsfähigeren Individuen.
Going through painful experiences in life makes us more resilient individuals. Going through painful experiences in life makes us more resilient individuals.
Jedenfalls besteht eine Wahrscheinlichkeit von mehr als 50%, dass sie die Prüfung beim ersten Versuch besteht.
Anyway, there is more than a 50% chance that she will pass the exam on the first try. Anyway, there is more than a 50% chance that she will pass the exam on the first try.
Wenn du lernst, mit konstruktiver Kritik richtig umzugehen, wird dir die Zusammenarbeit mit anderen viel mehr Spaß machen.
If you learn to handle constructive criticism correctly, you will find cooperation with others much more enjoyable. If you learn to handle constructive criticism correctly, you will find cooperation with others much more enjoyable.
Wenn Sie nicht noch einmal Ausreden vorbringen möchten, machen Sie einfach das, was Sie tun müssen.
If you don't want to bring up excuses again, simply do what you need to do. If you don't want to bring up excuses again, simply do what you need to do.
Selbst wenn er hypothetisch gute Absichten hatte, als er allen von ihrem riskanten Plan erzählte, bleibt die Tatsache bestehen, dass er ihr Vertrauen verraten hat.
Even if he had, hypothetically speaking, good intentions when telling everyone about your risky plan, the fact remains that he betrayed your trust. Even if he had, hypothetically speaking, good intentions when telling everyone about your risky plan, the fact remains that he betrayed your trust.
Ich hätte diese Firma googeln sollen, bevor ich ihr Angebot annahm. Sie sind bekannte Betrüger.
I should have Googled this company before I accepted their offer. They are well-known scammers. I should have Googled this company before I accepted their offer. They are well-known scammers.
Was du sagst, gilt insbesondere hinsichtlich der heutigen Werbespots.
What you are saying is particularly true regarding today's commercials. What you are saying is particularly true regarding today's commercials.
Die meisten Väter möchten, dass ihre Söhne in ihre Fußstapfen treten und eines Tages ihr Geschäft übernehmen.
Most fathers want their sons to step in their footsteps and take over their business one day. Most fathers want their sons to step in their footsteps and take over their business one day.
Epidemien sind aufgrund der ständig wachsenden Antibiotikaresistenz von Bakterien schwer zu bekämpfen.
Epidemics are difficult to fight because of bacteria's ever-growing resistance to antibiotics. Epidemics are difficult to fight because of bacteria's ever-growing resistance to antibiotics.
Alzheimer ist eine der am weitesten verbreiteten Formen von Demenz.
Alzheimer's is one of the most widespread forms of dementia. Alzheimer's is one of the most widespread forms of dementia.
Die meisten Grund- und weiterführenden Schulen in Industrieländern sind mit Smartboards ausgestattet, um die Entwicklung von Unterrichtsmethoden zu erleichtern.
Most primary and secondary schools in industrialized countries are equipped with smartboards to facilitate the development of teaching methods. Most primary and secondary schools in industrialized countries are equipped with smartboards to facilitate the development of teaching methods.
Wenn Sie Tiramisu nicht mögen, weil es zu schwer für Sie ist, können Sie sich für ein leichteres Dessert entscheiden.
If you don't like tiramisu because it is too heavy for you, you can opt for a lighter dessert. If you don't like tiramisu because it is too heavy for you, you can opt for a lighter dessert.
Bitte informieren Sie mich umgehend, wenn Sie Abweichungen vom erwarteten Ergebnis unseres Plans feststellen.
Please inform me immediately if you experience any deviation from the expected outcome of our plan. Please inform me immediately if you experience any deviation from the expected outcome of our plan.
Es erwies sich als unmöglich für Jared, seine Gewohnheit, zu viel auszugeben, zu brechen, also entschied er sich für ein aufregendes Hobby, das seine Freizeit in Anspruch nimmt.
It proved impossible for Jarrett to break his habit of overspending, so he chose an exciting hobby that occupied his free time. It proved impossible for Jarrett to break his habit of overspending, so he chose an exciting hobby that occupied his free time.
Wenn du das College als eine außergewöhnliche Gelegenheit betrachtest, die nicht jedem geboten wird, fällt es dir leichter, dort dein Studium zu beginnen.
If you think of going to college as an exceptional opportunity not provided to everyone, it will be easier for you to start your studies there. If you think of going to college as an exceptional opportunity not provided to everyone, it will be easier for you to start your studies there.
Niemand hat Lisa jemals weinen oder sich aufregen sehen, weil sie erstaunlich geschickt darin ist, ihre Gefühle zu verbergen.
No one has ever seen Lisa cry or get upset because she is amazingly adept at hiding her emotions. No one has ever seen Lisa cry or get upset because she is amazingly adept at hiding her emotions.
Manchmal sind wir zu sehr mit unseren eigenen Gedanken beschäftigt, um die Bedürfnisse anderer zu bemerken.
Sometimes we are too preoccupied with our own thoughts to notice others' needs. Sometimes we are too preoccupied with our own thoughts to notice others' needs.
Die Materialien, die Sie gesammelt haben, sind für unsere Fallstudie nicht mehr relevant.
The materials that you have collected are not relevant to our case study anymore. The materials that you have collected are not relevant to our case study anymore.
Die Leute sind immer vom Sachverstand unserer hochqualifizierten Dolmetscher beeindruckt.
People are always impressed by the expertise of our highly trained interpreters. People are always impressed by the expertise of our highly trained interpreters.
Würden Sie bitte näher erläutern, was Sie gerade über ungarische Weine gesagt haben?
Would you please elaborate on what you have just said about Hungarian wines? Would you please elaborate on what you have just said about Hungarian wines?
Sie haben gute Gründe, optimistisch in die Zukunft zu blicken, da sie über alle Dokumente verfügen, die belegen, dass sie als Migranten legal in Deutschland bleiben können.
They have good grounds to be optimistic about the future, since they have all the documents that prove that they can stay legally in Germany as migrants. They have good grounds to be optimistic about the future, since they have all the documents that prove that they can stay legally in Germany as migrants.
Yoga wird von den meisten Trainierenden als Mittel zur Verbesserung der körperlichen Fitness und zur Erreichung des inneren Friedens angesehen.
Yoga is considered by most exercisers as a means of enhancing physical fitness and reaching inner peace. Yoga is considered by most exercisers as a means of enhancing physical fitness and reaching inner peace.
So wie Gewichtheben sie in Form bringen kann, so kann es auch eine richtige Ernährung.
Just as weightlifting will get you in shape, so will a proper diet, too. Just as weightlifting will get you in shape, so will a proper diet, too.
Spaß, Themenparks, Zoos oder einfach nur Wandern in den Bergen sind überall integraler Bestandteil des Tourismus.
Spas, theme parks, zoos, or just hiking in the mountains are all integral parts of tourism everywhere. Spas, theme parks, zoos, or just hiking in the mountains are all integral parts of tourism everywhere.
Was mich betrifft, ist das Leben auf dem Land dem Leben in einer überfüllten Stadt vorzuziehen.
As for me, living in the countryside is preferable to living in an overcrowded city. As for me, living in the countryside is preferable to living in an overcrowded city.
Das englische Ferienlager in diesem Jahr war ohne Zweifel das unvergesslichste, das wir bisher hatten.
The English camp this year has been, without doubt, the most memorable one we have had so far. The English camp this year has been, without doubt, the most memorable one we have had so far.
Sie haben sich im Vergleich zu vor 20 Jahren enorm verändert.
They have changed immeasurably compared to what they were like 20 years ago. They have changed immeasurably compared to what they were like 20 years ago.
Infolge der Impfung werden immer weniger Menschen mit Infektionskrankheiten diagnostiziert.
As a result of vaccination, fewer and fewer people are diagnosed with infectious diseases. As a result of vaccination, fewer and fewer people are diagnosed with infectious diseases.
Umfangreiche Nutzung von Düngemittel erschweren es den Verbrauchern, hochwertige Bioprodukte in den Regalen der Geschäfte zu finden.
Extensive use of fertilizers makes it difficult for consumers to find high-quality organic products on the shelves of stores. Extensive use of fertilizers makes it difficult for consumers to find high-quality organic products on the shelves of stores.
Mit 16 Jahren darfst du in den USA nur mit Zustimmung deiner Eltern Auto fahren.
At the age of 16, you are only permitted to drive a car in the USA with your parents' consent. At the age of 16, you are only permitted to drive a car in the USA with your parents' consent.
Das Internet hat inzwischen seinen Weg in fast alle Lebensbereiche gefunden.
The Internet has found its way into almost all areas of life by now. The Internet has found its way into almost all areas of life by now.
Er rannte mühelos meilenweit, bevor sein Bein operiert wurde.
He used to run effortlessly for miles and miles before his leg was operated on. He used to run effortlessly for miles and miles before his leg was operated on.
Ihr Engagement für die Abfallreduzierung machte sie zu einer herausragenden Persönlichkeit unter den örtlichen Umweltschützern.
Her dedication to the cause of reducing waste made her an outstanding figure among local environmentalists. Her dedication to the cause of reducing waste made her an outstanding figure among local environmentalists.
Unternehmen nutzen Social-Media-Werbung, um ihren bestehenden Kundenstamm zu erweitern.
Companies use social media advertisement as a way of expanding their existing client base. Companies use social media advertisement as a way of expanding their existing client base.
Sie fühlten sich emotional und mental so ausgelaugt, dass es Zeit wurde, ihre Arbeit einzustellen und auf die Galapagos-Inseln zu fahren.
They felt so drained emotionally and mentally that it was time for them to stop working and leave for the Galapagos Islands. They felt so drained emotionally and mentally that it was time for them to stop working and leave for the Galapagos Islands.
Mit Ausnahme der selektiven Abfallsammlung haben wir heute jedes Thema auf der Tagesordnung behandelt.
With the exception of selective waste collection, we have covered every topic on the agenda today. With the exception of selective waste collection, we have covered every topic on the agenda today.
Künstliche Intelligenz wird wahrscheinlich in naher Zukunft die meisten Aufgaben übernehmen, die derzeit von Menschen ausgeführt werden.
Artificial intelligence will probably take over most jobs currently done by humans in the very near future. Artificial intelligence will probably take over most jobs currently done by humans in the very near future.
Ich war letztens sehr beschäftigt, mich auf die Babyparty für meine Schwägerin vorzubereiten.
I was very busy the other night preparing for the baby shower for my sister-in-law. I was very busy the other night preparing for the baby shower for my sister-in-law.
Ich spreche ziemlich gut Französisch, weil wir für eine Weile in Montreal gelebt haben.
I speak fairly good French because we were living in Montreal for a while. I speak fairly good French because we were living in Montreal for a while.
Ich hatte nicht die Absicht, zur Ausstellung für zeitgenössische Kunst zu gehen, aber meine Freunde versicherten mir, dass ich es nicht bereuen würde, wenn ich mich ihnen anschließen würde.
I had no intention of going to the contemporary art exhibition, but my friends told me I would not regret it if I joined them. I had no intention of going to the contemporary art exhibition, but my friends told me I would not regret it if I joined them.
Nach dem Einbruch hörten wir widersprüchliche Geschichten über den genauen Wert der gestohlenen Gegenstände.
We heard contradictory stories after the burglary as to the exact value of the stolen objects. We heard contradictory stories after the burglary as to the exact value of the stolen objects.
Sie sahen sich gezwungen, ihr Haus nach dem Erdbeben zu verlassen, weil die Beamten begonnen hatten, das gesamte Gebiet zu evakuieren.
They were compelled to leave their home after the earthquake because officials had begun evacuating the whole area. They were compelled to leave their home after the earthquake because officials had begun evacuating the whole area.
Mit wem haben Sie diese Daten geteilt?
Who did you share these data with? Who did you share these data with?
Die Bibel wird oft nur als ein altes Buch voller veralteter Informationen angesehen, aber für viele ist sie eine unersetzliche Quelle der Weisheit und Führung.
The Bible is often regarded as just an ancient book full of outdated information, but for many it is an irreplaceable source of wisdom and guidance. The Bible is often regarded as just an ancient book full of outdated information, but for many it is an irreplaceable source of wisdom and guidance.
Es liegen einige sehr ereignisreiche Tage vor uns, auf die wir uns wirklich freuen.
There are some very eventful days ahead of us that we are really looking forward to. There are some very eventful days ahead of us that we are really looking forward to.
Was ich an ihm wirklich bewundere, ist, dass er die Fehler anderer Menschen sehr toleriert.
What I really admire about him is that he is very tolerant of other people's flaws. What I really admire about him is that he is very tolerant of other people's flaws.
Wenn ich nicht in einer multikulturellen Umgebung aufgewachsen wäre, wäre es für mich schwieriger, die Ansichten anderer zu akzeptieren.
If I hadn't grown up in a multicultural environment, it would be harder for me to accept other people's views. If I hadn't grown up in a multicultural environment, it would be harder for me to accept other people's views.
Er versuchte mich vom Gegenteil davon zu überzeugen, was ich für wahr hielt.
He was trying to persuade me about the opposite of what I believed was true. He was trying to persuade me about the opposite of what I believed was true.
Wie das alte Sprichwort sagt, Taten sprechen mehr als Worte.
As the old saying goes, actions speak louder than words. As the old saying goes, actions speak louder than words.
Ich wünschte, ich wüsste die Antwort auf diese Frage.
I wish I knew the answer to this question. I wish I knew the answer to this question.
Robin war eine so außergewöhnliche Scharfschützin, dass sie im Grunde nicht in der Lage war, ihr Ziel zu verfehlen.
Robin was such an exceptional sharpshooter that she was basically incapable of missing her target. Robin was such an exceptional sharpshooter that she was basically incapable of missing her target.
Außer du hast eine bessere Vorstellung davon, wie du dieses Durcheinander beseitigen kannst, sollten wir uns besser hinknien und mit dem Schrubben beginnen.
Unless you have a better idea about how to clean up this mess, we had better get down on our knees and start scrubbing. Unless you have a better idea about how to clean up this mess, we had better get down on our knees and start scrubbing.
Erinnerst du dich an die genauen Worte, die ich dich vor ein paar Minuten gebeten habe auswendig zu lernen?
Do you remember the exact words I asked you to memorize a few minutes ago? Do you remember the exact words I asked you to memorize a few minutes ago?
Verallgemeinerungen wie alle Männer haben Bindungsängste sind nicht unbedingt wahr.
Generalizations like all men are afraid of commitment are not necessarily true. Generalizations like all men are afraid of commitment are not necessarily true.
Ich glaube, wir sollten uns nicht in der Öffentlichkeit umarmen, weil es zu Missverständnissen führen könnte.
I believe we should not hug in public, because it could lead to misunderstanding. I believe we should not hug in public, because it could lead to misunderstanding.
Einige der Charaktere in dem Buch sind nur Stereotypen, aber viele haben starke, einzigartige Persönlichkeiten.
Some of the characters in the book are just stereotypes, but many have strong, unique personalities. Some of the characters in the book are just stereotypes, but many have strong, unique personalities.
Was für sie gilt, gilt möglicherweise nicht für andere Personen und umgekehrt.
What applies to you may not apply to other people and vice versa. What applies to you may not apply to other people and vice versa.
Philipp wurde ermutigt, ein Studium in Elektrotechnik zu absolvieren, entschied sich jedoch stattdessen für ein Informatikstudium.
Philip was encouraged to do a degree in electrical engineering, but he chose to study computer science instead. Philip was encouraged to do a degree in electrical engineering, but he chose to study computer science instead.
Die Konzepte, mit denen du noch nicht vertraut bist, sollten zuerst besprochen werden.
The concepts that you are not yet familiar with should be discussed first. The concepts that you are not yet familiar with should be discussed first.
Einige Menschen neigen dazu zu glauben, dass sie es schwerer haben als andere und beschweren sich ständig, während andere für alles, was sie haben, dankbar sind.
Some people are inclined to believe that they have it harder than others and complain all the time, while others are grateful for whatever they have. Some people are inclined to believe that they have it harder than others and complain all the time, while others are grateful for whatever they have.
Claras Mutter sagte ihr, dass es wichtig sei, ihren Träumen zu folgen, aber es sollte nicht auf Kosten ihrer Ehe geschehen.
Clara's mother told her that following her dreams was important, but it should not happen at the expense of her marriage. Clara's mother told her that following her dreams was important, but it should not happen at the expense of her marriage.
In diesem Jahr hat unser Magazin die niedrigste Anzahl von Abonnenten verzeichnet, 3200 um genau zu sein.
This year, our magazine has seen the lowest number of subscribers, 3,200 to be exact. This year, our magazine has seen the lowest number of subscribers, 3,200 to be exact.
Ihnen wurde das Darlehen nicht gewährt, weil Ihr Antrag die von der Bank festgelegten Kriterien nicht erfüllte.
They were not granted the loan, because their application didn't meet the basic criteria set forth by the bank. They were not granted the loan, because their application didn't meet the basic criteria set forth by the bank.
Er wurde von der Firma nicht deshalb nicht eingestellt, weil es ihm an Kompetenz mangelte, sondern weil er unerfahren war.
He wasn't hired by the firm not because of his lack of competence, but because he was inexperienced. He wasn't hired by the firm not because of his lack of competence, but because he was inexperienced.
Wir sind es unseren treuen Unterstützern schuldig, sie monatlich über die Fortschritte des Baus der neuen Schule in Uganda zu informieren.
We owe it to our faithful supporters to inform them on a monthly basis about the progress on the construction of the new school in Uganda. We owe it to our faithful supporters to inform them on a monthly basis about the progress on the construction of the new school in Uganda.
Jahrzehntelang glaubte man, dass Frauen nicht in der Lage seien, die gleichen hohen Unternehmenspositionen wie Männer zu besetzen.
For decades it was believed that women aren't capable of fulfilling the same high corporate positions as men. For decades it was believed that women aren't capable of fulfilling the same high corporate positions as men.
Ich konnte keinen großen Unterschied in der Qualität der beiden Kleider feststellen, obwohl eines doppelt so teuer wie das andere war.
I could not see a major difference in the quality of the two dresses, though one was twice as expensive as the other. I could not see a major difference in the quality of the two dresses, though one was twice as expensive as the other.
Wenn es um seinen Arbeitsstil geht, kann dieser am genauesten, im wahrsten Sinne des Wortes, als eifrig beschrieben werden.
When it comes to his work style, it can be most accurately described as zealous, in the best sense of the word. When it comes to his work style, it can be most accurately described as zealous, in the best sense of the word.
Als sie für die Weltmeisterschaft trainierten, übten sie einige revolutionäre neue Taktiken, die andere Fußballmannschaften schnell lernten und kopierten.
Training for the World Cup, they practiced some revolutionary new tactics that other football teams quickly learned and copied. Training for the World Cup, they practiced some revolutionary new tactics that other football teams quickly learned and copied.
Es ist erwähnenswert, dass die Zahl der adoptierten Kinder heutzutage dramatisch ansteigt.
It is worth noting that the number of adopted children is dramatically growing these days. It is worth noting that the number of adopted children is dramatically growing these days.
Alle Teammitglieder haben, in unterschiedlichem Ausmaß, zur erfolgreichen Umsetzung der neuen Geschäftspolitik beigetragen.
All team members have contributed, to varying degrees, to the successful implementation of the new business policy. All team members have contributed, to varying degrees, to the successful implementation of the new business policy.
Unsere Persönlichkeit entwickelt sich in den verschiedenen Phasen unseres Lebens weiter.
Our personality keeps developing throughout the different stages of our life. Our personality keeps developing throughout the different stages of our life.
Kindererziehung umfasst viel Verantwortung und Verpflichtung.
Raising children involves a lot of responsibility and obligation. Raising children involves a lot of responsibility and obligation.
Weisheit ist die Art von Konzept, die eindeutig nicht messbar ist.
Wisdom is the kind of concept that is clearly impossible to measure. Wisdom is the kind of concept that is clearly impossible to measure.
Unter welchem Aspekt sollte dieses Problem Ihrer Meinung nach behandelt werden?
From which aspect do you think this issue should be dealt with? From which aspect do you think this issue should be dealt with?
Die Regierung hätte in so kurzer Zeit keinen besseren Weg finden können, um die Wirtschaft anzukurbeln.
The government couldn't have found a better way to boost the economy in such a short period of time. The government couldn't have found a better way to boost the economy in such a short period of time.
Es kam ein Wendepunkt in ihrem Leben, als sie erkannten, dass ein Abschluss viel wertvoller ist, als die ganze Zeit mit ihren Freunden rumhängen zu können.
There came a turning point in their life when they realized that getting a degree is much more valuable than being able to hang out with their friends all the time. There came a turning point in their life when they realized that getting a degree is much more valuable than being able to hang out with their friends all the time.
Die Mitarbeiter der Firma waren alle eindeutig für die kürzeren Arbeitszeiten.
The employees of the firm were all unequivocally in favor of the shorter working hours. The employees of the firm were all unequivocally in favor of the shorter working hours.
Eine neuere Übersetzung des Dokuments scheint zu beweisen, dass das Auto tatsächlich an Herrn Brown verkauft und ihm nicht geschenkt wurde.
A more recent translation of the document appears to prove that the car was, in fact, sold to Mr. Brown and not given him as a present. A more recent translation of the document appears to prove that the car was, in fact, sold to Mr. Brown and not given him as a present.
Erst wenn sie alles erreicht haben, wonach sie sich gesehnt haben, beginnen manche Menschen es zu schätzen, Zeit mit ihren Lieben zu verbringen.
Not until they've achieved everything they had been longing for, do some people start appreciating spending time with their loved ones. Not until they've achieved everything they had been longing for, do some people start appreciating spending time with their loved ones.
Unser vorherrschendes Motiv bei dieser Anwendung ist es, Menschen beim Erlernen der englischen Sprache zu helfen, indem sie Phrasen und Sätze hören.
Our predominant motive with this application is to help people learn the English language by way of listening to phrases and sentences. Our predominant motive with this application is to help people learn the English language by way of listening to phrases and sentences.
Obwohl einige Wörter in beiden Sprachen ähnlich verwendet werden, weisen ihre Satzstrukturen signifikante Unterschiede auf.
Though some words are used similarly in both languages, their sentence structures show significant differences. Though some words are used similarly in both languages, their sentence structures show significant differences.
Paare, die heute kurz vor der Scheidung stehen, haben normalerweise zwei Möglichkeiten: Sie gehen entweder getrennte Wege oder geben ihrer Beziehung eine weitere Chance, indem sie einen Eheberater finden.
Couples on the brink of divorce today usually have two choices. They either go separate ways or give their relationship one more chance by finding a marriage counselor. Couples on the brink of divorce today usually have two choices. They either go separate ways or give their relationship one more chance by finding a marriage counselor.
Insgesamt können wir sagen, dass Flugreisen die schnellste und bequemste Art von Transport für lange Strecken sind.
Overall, we can say that air travel is the fastest and most convenient means of transportation for long distances. Overall, we can say that air travel is the fastest and most convenient means of transportation for long distances.
Dieser Erfolg liefert starke Beweise dafür, dass Energie und Geld, die Hotelbesitzer in ihr Geschäft investieren, zu einer wachsenden Anzahl von Gästen führt.
This success provides strong evidence that the energy and money hotel owners invest in their business results in a growing number of guests. This success provides strong evidence that the energy and money hotel owners invest in their business results in a growing number of guests.
Wir haben Grund zu der Annahme, dass die Wilderer versuchen werden, die Drohnen, die illegale Ereignisse im Wildreservat aufzeichnen, zu zerstören.
We have reason to believe that the poachers will make an attempt to destroy the drones that record illegal events in the wildlife reserve. We have reason to believe that the poachers will make an attempt to destroy the drones that record illegal events in the wildlife reserve.
E-Learning bietet erhebliche Vorteile gegenüber herkömmlichen Lernmethoden.
E-learning provides significant advantages over traditional learning methods. E-learning provides significant advantages over traditional learning methods.
So einfach es auch sein soll, das Ausmalen von Räumen ist kein problemloses Unterfangen und erfordert zumindest einige Erfahrung.
However easy it is said to be, painting your rooms on your own is not a trouble-free procedure and requires at least some experience. However easy it is said to be, painting your rooms on your own is not a trouble-free procedure and requires at least some experience.
Nur um sicher zu gehen, habe ich die Papiere zweimal überprüft, um nachzusehen, ob sie unterschrieben waren.
Just to be sure, I checked the papers twice to see if they were signed. Just to be sure, I checked the papers twice to see if they were signed.
War es ein Zufall, oder hatten Sie vor, sich in Florenz zu treffen?
Was it a mere coincidence or did you plan to meet in Florence? Was it a mere coincidence or did you plan to meet in Florence?
Im Rahmen meines neuesten Auftrags besuche ich ethnische Restaurants und spreche, wo immer möglich, mit den Köchen selbst, um mehr über die beliebtesten Küchen der Welt zu erfahren.
As part of my latest assignment, I visit ethnic restaurants and, wherever possible, talk to the chefs themselves to learn about the world's most popular cuisines. As part of my latest assignment, I visit ethnic restaurants and, wherever possible, talk to the chefs themselves to learn about the world's most popular cuisines.
Einer der häufigsten Indikatoren für Drogenkonsum ist destruktives Verhalten und der Verlust des Interesses an Beruf und Familie.
One of the most common indicators of drug use is destructive behavior and loss of interest in work and family. One of the most common indicators of drug use is destructive behavior and loss of interest in work and family.
Das Konzept eines Wohlfahrtsstaates bezieht sich auf den Wohlstand und die Gesundheit von Menschen mit relativ hohem Lebensstandard.
The concept of a welfare state refers to the prosperity and good health of people with relatively high living standards. The concept of a welfare state refers to the prosperity and good health of people with relatively high living standards.
Ohne Tierversuche könnten Forscher keine wirksamen Heilmittel für schwere menschliche Krankheiten finden.
If it weren't for animal experimentation, researchers would not be able to find efficient cures for serious human diseases. If it weren't for animal experimentation, researchers would not be able to find efficient cures for serious human diseases.
Um die städtische Überlastung zu bekämpfen, haben die Stadtbehörden Autos aus bestimmten Innenstadträumen verbannt.
In an effort to combat urban congestion, city authorities have banned cars from certain downtown areas. In an effort to combat urban congestion, city authorities have banned cars from certain downtown areas.
Als Folge seiner Abschiebung aus den USA kann er seine Familie nur treffen, wenn sie ihn in Bolivien besuchen.
As a consequence of him having been deported from the USA, he can only meet his family if they visit him in Bolivia. As a consequence of him having been deported from the USA, he can only meet his family if they visit him in Bolivia.
Es gibt keine Möglichkeit zu wissen, was die Zukunft bringt.
There is no way of knowing what the future holds. There is no way of knowing what the future holds.
Welche unterhaltsamen Freizeitbeschäftigungen können Sie den neu angekommenen Sommerschülern empfehlen?
What kind of entertaining pastime activities can you recommend to the newly arrived summer school students? What kind of entertaining pastime activities can you recommend to the newly arrived summer school students?
Beim Kauf einer eigenen Wohnung sind ziemlich viele Faktoren zu berücksichtigen.
There are quite many factors to consider when purchasing an apartment of your own. There are quite many factors to consider when purchasing an apartment of your own.
Die fesselnde Persönlichkeit des Mädchens lenkte sowohl Männer als auch Frauen im Büro von ihren Aufgaben ab.
The girl's captivating personality distracted both men and women in the office from their tasks. The girl's captivating personality distracted both men and women in the office from their tasks.
Zum Glück war der Schaden nicht so schwerwiegend, wie es zunächst schien.
Fortunately, the damage was not as severe as it had first appeared to be. Fortunately, the damage was not as severe as it had first appeared to be.
Finnland hat mehr als genug Lachs, um zahlreiche Länder mit diesem fettarmen und nahrhaften Fisch zu versorgen.
Finland has more than enough salmon to supply numerous countries with this low-fat and nutritious fish. Finland has more than enough salmon to supply numerous countries with this low-fat and nutritious fish.
Hunter möchte Anna einen Antrag machen, aber damit dies geschehen kann, muss er zuerst eine romantische Kulisse schaffen.
Hunter wants to propose to Anne, but in order for that to happen, he will need to create a romantic setting first. Hunter wants to propose to Anne, but in order for that to happen, he will need to create a romantic setting first.
Neugier über das Ausmaß des Ereignisses veranlasste ihn, ausführlich nach der Gala zu fragen.
Curiosity about the scale of the event drove him to ask about the gala in detail. Curiosity about the scale of the event drove him to ask about the gala in detail.
Was sind die Voraussetzungen, um ein professioneller Übersetzer zu werden?
What are the prerequisites of becoming a professional translator? What are the prerequisites of becoming a professional translator?
Auch wenn ich nicht in der Lage bin, ihr Ratschläge zu geben, würde ich gerne meine Ideen mit ihr teilen.
Even though I am not in the position of giving her advice, I would gladly share my ideas with her. Even though I am not in the position of giving her advice, I would gladly share my ideas with her.
Ich vermutete, dass er irischer Herkunft war, als ich seine flammenden roten Haare sah, aber es wurde offensichtlich, als ich seinen dicken Akzent hörte.
I suspected he had Irish origins when I saw his flaming red hair, but they became evident when I heard his thick accent. I suspected he had Irish origins when I saw his flaming red hair, but they became evident when I heard his thick accent.
Es muss glutenfreie Mahlzeiten in diesem Diner gegeben haben, aber ich wollte einige traditionelle lokale Spezialitäten probieren.
There must have been gluten-free meals at that diner, but I wanted to taste some traditional local specialties. There must have been gluten-free meals at that diner, but I wanted to taste some traditional local specialties.
Am Anfang ihrer Ehe lebten sie bescheiden in einer winzigen Wohnung.
In the early days of their marriage, they lived modestly in a tiny flat. In the early days of their marriage, they lived modestly in a tiny flat.
Es hätte andere Alternativen für den Veranstaltungsort des Familientreffens geben können, aber dieses Hotel am See schien die beste Wahl zu sein.
There could have been other alternatives for the venue of the family reunion, but this lakeside hotel seemed to be the best choice. There could have been other alternatives for the venue of the family reunion, but this lakeside hotel seemed to be the best choice.
Nachdem der Rauchmelder alle geweckt hatte, forderte uns die Hotelleitung auf, das Gebäude so schnell wie möglich zu verlassen.
After the smoke alarm had gone off waking everyone, the hotel management urged us to leave the building as soon as possible. After the smoke alarm had gone off waking everyone, the hotel management urged us to leave the building as soon as possible.
Diskriminierung jeglicher Art sollte an den Schulen und Arbeitsplätzen der Stadt bestraft werden.
Discrimination of any kind should be punished at the schools and workplaces of the town. Discrimination of any kind should be punished at the schools and workplaces of the town.
Die Führung des Unternehmens tolerierte das Rauchen auch in den ausgewiesenen Bereichen nicht mehr.
The leadership of the company didn't tolerate smoking even in the designated areas any longer. The leadership of the company didn't tolerate smoking even in the designated areas any longer.
Diese Beschreibung sollte spezifischer auf die Anforderungen der Position des Managerassistenten eingehen.
This description should be more specific about the requirements of the manager-assistant position. This description should be more specific about the requirements of the manager-assistant position.
Die Augmented Reality-Funktion der Anwendung begann als eine Art Experiment, erwies sich jedoch als äußerst beliebt.
The augmented reality feature of the application began as a kind of experiment but proved to be immensely popular. The augmented reality feature of the application began as a kind of experiment but proved to be immensely popular.
Einige der Informationen, die wir über das Praktikumsprogramm erhielten, waren eher mehrdeutig.
Some of the information we were given about the internship program was rather ambiguous. Some of the information we were given about the internship program was rather ambiguous.
Wenn diese Gegenmaßnahmen nicht getroffen worden wären, hätte eine weitere Ausbreitung des Feuers nicht verhindert werden können.
If these countermeasures had not been taken, further spreading of the fire couldn't have been prevented. If these countermeasures had not been taken, further spreading of the fire couldn't have been prevented.
Da die Zahl der Arbeitsstunden zunimmt, steigen auch die Gehälter stetig.
As the number of hours spent at work is increasing, salaries are also consistently rising. As the number of hours spent at work is increasing, salaries are also consistently rising.
Menschen, die am Rande der Gesellschaft leben, entscheiden sich entweder für diesen Lebensstil oder sind häufig, aufgrund ihrer Umstände, dazu gezwungen.
People living on the margins of society either opt for that lifestyle or, more commonly, are forced to do so by their circumstances. People living on the margins of society either opt for that lifestyle or, more commonly, are forced to do so by their circumstances.
Rebellisches Verhalten sollte niemals übersehen werden, sondern diskutiert und behandelt werden.
Rebellious behavior should never be overlooked but, rather, discussed and dealt with. Rebellious behavior should never be overlooked but, rather, discussed and dealt with.
Es tut mir so leid, dass ich unhöflich bin und dich während deiner Rede unterbreche.
I'm so sorry for being rude and interrupting you during your speech. I'm so sorry for being rude and interrupting you during your speech.
Das Publikum wurde besonders aufmerksam, als der Redner begann, praktische Möglichkeiten zur Verkürzung der Bildschirmzeit für Kinder aufzulisten.
The audience became particularly attentive when the speaker began to list practical ways to reduce screen time for kids. The audience became particularly attentive when the speaker began to list practical ways to reduce screen time for kids.
Ich hatte nur im Laden gekaufte Zimtschnecken probiert und war wirklich überrascht von dem reichen Geschmack des köstlichen Desserts meiner Tante.
I had only tried store-bought cinnamon rolls, so I was genuinely surprised by the rich flavor of my aunt's mouth-watering dessert. I had only tried store-bought cinnamon rolls, so I was genuinely surprised by the rich flavor of my aunt's mouth-watering dessert.
Erinnerte sich kaum an sein Jahr in Sri Lanka, das als Kind bei seinen Pflegeeltern verbracht hatte.
He barely remembered anything about his year in Sri Lanka, which he spent as a child with his foster parents. He barely remembered anything about his year in Sri Lanka, which he spent as a child with his foster parents.
Manchmal ist ein wunderbarer Gefährte und manchmal ist wie ein mürrischer alter Mann.
Sometimes he is a wonderful companion and, at other times, he is like a grumpy old man. Sometimes he is a wonderful companion and, at other times, he is like a grumpy old man.
Das bekannteste Musikfestival der Stadt ist auf jeden Fall einen Besuch wert.
The town's most well-known music festival is definitely worth a visit. The town's most well-known music festival is definitely worth a visit.
Der Ingenieur hatte verzweifelt versucht, die Frist für die Einreichung seiner Pläne einzuhalten, und war daher sehr erleichtert, als diese verlängert wurde.
The engineer had been desperately trying to meet the deadline of submitting his plans, so he was greatly relieved when it was extended. The engineer had been desperately trying to meet the deadline of submitting his plans, so he was greatly relieved when it was extended.